There is a corner in almost every garden where nothing seems to grow. Too much shade from a fence, a wall, a tree. The soil never dries out properly. Every potato planted there rots before harvest. Every tomato planted there barely survives the summer. That dead zone, the spot every gardener has given up on, is exactly where this plant thrives. The plant is called Chinese yam, and it does something that almost no other food crop can do. It produces an enormous, starchy, nutritious tuber in deep shade, in poor soil, with almost zero care, and then stores itself underground for months without rotting. Picture a freshly dug potato left unwashed in a cool corner. Within weeks, it is soft, sprouting, and heading toward rot. Now picture a Chinese yam root left in the ground, through autumn, through winter, through early spring. It stays firm. It stays fresh. The earth itself becomes its refrigerator. This is not a minor gardening curiosity. This is a plant with over 2,000 years of documented cultivation. A plant that fed Chinese, Japanese, and Korean communities as both a staple food and a cornerstone of traditional medicine. A plant that survived neglect, drought, shade, and cold, while producing consistently, year after year. By the end of this video, the dead zones in any garden will look very different, because what grows there might be the most resilient food crop most Western gardeners have never considered. To understand why Chinese yam is so remarkable, it helps to understand the challenges that make the humble potato a surprisingly fragile crop. Potatoes require full sun, minimum 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. In partial shade, potato plants cannot photosynthesize efficiently. The yield drops dramatically. In deep shade, potatoes barely produce at all. This makes potatoes completely useless for the shaded corners, the north-facing beds, the areas under trees that exist in almost every garden. Potatoes are vulnerable to late blight. Phytophthora infestans, the same pathogen that caused the Irish potato famine of the 1840s, is still one of the most destructive agricultural diseases in the world. It spreads rapidly in cool, wet conditions. It can destroy an entire potato crop in days. Colorado potato beetles are a constant pressure. These aggressive insects can defoliate a potato plant, stripping it of leaves and photosynthetic capacity before tubers have had time to develop. Managing them requires either regular pesticide applications or intensive manual intervention. And after harvest, the storage challenge begins. Freshly dug potatoes need curing at specific temperatures and humidity levels to seal the skin and develop proper storage quality. Without correct curing, potatoes rot quickly. Even with perfect curing, they need cool, dark conditions, good airflow, and regular inspection to prevent one rotting tuber from spreading decay to its neighbors. None of this makes potatoes a bad crop. They are one of the great food plants of human history, but it does make them a demanding crop, one with specific requirements that limit where and how easily they can be grown. And that is exactly the gap that Chinese yam fills. Chinese yam. Scientific name, Dioscorea polystachya, also known as cinnamon vine. And once the reason for that name is understood, it becomes one of the most memorable plants in any garden. When Chinese yam flowers, the small white blooms release a fragrance that is unmistakably cinnamon. In the middle of summer, a vine climbing a fence or trellis fills the surrounding air with the scent of warm spice. It is extraordinary, a food crop that also perfumes the garden. Chinese yam has been cultivated across China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam for over 2,000 years. In traditional Chinese medicine, it is classified as a superior herb, one that can be consumed regularly and long-term, without negative effects. In Japan, it is called Nagaimo, grated raw over rice or noodles, a beloved everyday food. If you are watching this and have not yet subscribed to Famine Plant Secrets, this is the moment. Every week, this channel uncovers one extraordinary plant, forgotten by Western gardening culture but known and valued across the rest of the world. The community growing around this channel is discovering that the most useful food plants are often the least famous ones. Hit subscribe and join them. Now let's understand exactly what makes Chinese yam so biologically remarkable, because the science of how it grows explains everything about why it thrives where other crops fail. Chinese yam is a vine. This single fact changes everything about how it interacts with shade. When a potato plant is in shade, the entire plant suffers. The leaves are shaded. The stem is shaded. There is no escape. The plant cannot seek light. It can only stay where it is planted and try to make do with what it receives. Chinese yam operates completely differently. The root stays in the cool, shaded, moist soil, exactly the conditions it prefers. But the vine, climbing upward along a fence, a wall, a trellis, or even another plant, reaches above the shade zone. It can climb 10, 15, even 20 feet until it finds the light it needs for photosynthesis. The root stays cool. The leaves find sun. It is a strategy of extraordinary elegance. This is what ecologists call vertical layering. In natural forest systems, different plants occupy different vertical niches. Ground covers grow in deep shade at the base. Shrubs occupy the mid-level. Canopy trees reach the sun above. Chinese yam evolved in precisely these conditions as a woodland vine, accessing both the cool, protected soil of the forest floor and the sunlight of the upper canopy. The root system is another remarkable adaptation. Chinese yam produces a main tuber that grows vertically downward, reaching depths of 2 to 3 feet. At 2 to 3 feet below the surface, soil temperature stays remarkably stable. Cool in summer, protected from frost in winter, never freezing, never overheating. The Chinese yam root creates its own climate-controlled storage, using the thermal mass of the earth itself. This makes Chinese yam what survival gardeners call a stealth crop. It is not visible at the surface in winter. It stores itself. It requires no human infrastructure for preservation, and it quietly maintains its energy reserves, ready to produce again the following spring. But Chinese yam has a food production secret that most people never expect. Look closely at a mature Chinese yam vine in late summer, and small, brownish, rounded lumps appear, nestled in the leaf axils, where the leaves join the stem. These are called bulbils, aerial tubers, miniature potatoes growing not in the ground, but directly on the vine itself, in the open air. Each bulbil is genetically identical to the parent plant, a perfect clone, produced without pollination, without seeds, purely through vegetative reproduction. They range in size from a large marble to a small egg, and they are completely edible. Bulbils can be harvested in autumn when they begin to fall naturally from the vine. They have a mild, starchy flavor, similar to a small waxy potato. Roasted whole in a pan with olive oil, they develop a crispy exterior and soft, starchy interior. But their real value goes beyond eating. Each bulbil can be planted as a propagation unit. Plant a bulbil in spring, and it produces a full vine and begins developing a main tuber. This means one established Chinese yam vine can produce dozens of propagation units annually, allowing rapid expansion of a planting without any cost. One important note here: because Chinese yam spreads so effectively through bulbils, it has naturalized in parts of the eastern United States and is classified as invasive in some states. Before planting outdoors, it is essential to check local agricultural regulations for the specific area. In states where it is classified as invasive, it can be grown in containers, which actually concentrates the harvest and eliminates the spread concern entirely. The bulbils are remarkable, but the main event is what is happening 2 to 3 feet underground. The primary tuber of Chinese yam is a long, cylindrical, ivory-white root, growing vertically downward into the earth. In good soil, with a full growing season, this root can reach 2 to 3 feet in length and weigh 2 to 4 pounds from a single plant. Harvesting it requires patience and care. Because the tuber grows straight down, a narrow trench must be dug alongside the plant, carefully, to avoid snapping the root. This is not the casual fork-and-lift harvest of a potato. It is a deliberate excavation. But here is what that depth means for storage. At 2 to 3 feet underground, the soil temperature in most climates stays between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. This is exactly the temperature range that food storage experts recommend for root vegetable preservation. The Chinese yam root is already stored at the perfect temperature the moment it is in the ground. This means Chinese yam does not need to be harvested all at once. in mild climates. Tubers can be left in the ground through autumn and winter and dug as needed, fresh, firm, and perfectly preserved. There is no rush to harvest before frost. No race against rot. Simply mark the location and dig when the kitchen needs a fresh tuber. The texture of a freshly harvested Chinese yam tuber is immediately striking. The flesh is brilliant white, almost luminous. It is extraordinarily mucilaginous when cut raw, producing a slippery, gel-like quality that is unique among root vegetables. This mucilaginous quality comes from water-soluble polysaccharides, and it is specifically this property that has driven much of the scientific interest in Chinese yam as a functional food. So how is Chinese yam actually prepared and eaten? And does it live up to the extraordinary effort of growing it? Raw Chinese yam, peeled and grated, is called tororo in Japanese cuisine. It is served over hot rice, over cold soba noodles, or simply eaten straight with a little soy sauce. The texture is uniquely silky and slightly sticky, almost like a natural starchy sauce. Cooked, Chinese yam transforms completely. The slippery mucilaginous quality disappears. The texture becomes fluffy, light, and starchy, similar to a well-cooked floury potato, but with a more delicate, mildly sweet flavor. It can be boiled, steamed, roasted, or mashed. Nutritionally, Chinese yam is an excellent source of complex carbohydrates, dietary fiber, potassium, vitamin C, and B vitamins. It is lower in calories than potato, while being similarly filling and satisfying. It contains a compound called diasgenin, a plant steroid that has been extensively studied for its potential effects on hormonal health and inflammation. Diasgenin is actually the compound from which the first synthetic progesterone was derived in the 1940s. For storage after harvest, Chinese yam tubers keep well in a cool, dark place for several weeks. For longer storage, wrap individual tubers in newspaper and store in a cool basement or root cellar. Properly stored, they remain good for several months. Chinese yam, 2,000 years of cultivation, thrives in the shade that defeats potatoes, produces both edible vine tubers and a main root that stores itself underground, fills the garden with the scent of cinnamon when it flowers, and provides a nutritious, delicious, extraordinarily versatile harvest from the spots most gardeners have given up on entirely. Here is the challenge. Look at the garden space available, or even a balcony or patio. Is there a shaded corner, a north-facing wall, a spot under a tree, where nothing useful has ever grown? That is exactly where Chinese yam belongs. Drop the word shade in the comments below if there is a wasted spot that this plant could transform. Subscribe to Famine Plant Secrets for extraordinary forgotten plants every single week.